Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I will now call the Governance and Policy Committee meeting of February 25th, 2026 to order. Just a note, there seems to be a huge echo in here, and it's very loud. Before we continue. We're okay? All right, thank you. In the spirit of truth and reconciliation, I'll proceed with the land acknowledgement. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territories of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississaugas peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. Are there any declarations of interest? There are no declarations of interest at this time. Moving on to the approval of the agenda. Can I please have a motion to approve the agenda as distributed? Trustee Brown. All those in favor? Opposed? The agenda is approved. Moving on to item 5, which is the approval of the minutes of January 28th, 2026. Can I have please have a motion to approve the draft minutes of the Governance Policy Committee of January 28th. I see Trustee Morton. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. Moving on to our information items. The first information item is the Policy Governance Framework and 5-year review cycle, and I will pass it on to Senior Manager Galen Eagle.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, it's my privilege to be here tonight to provide an update on the Policy Governance Framework and 5-year review cycle. So, over the past year, the board has undertaken a comprehensive reform of its policy governance framework to improve clarity, consistency, accountability, and accessibility. This work began with the adoption of the policy development policy and accompanying policy development procedure, establishing how policies and procedures are initiated, developed, approved, reviewed, and maintained, and clarifying governance direction and approval pathways across the system. So at this committee, over the last several months, staff have provided staged updates outlining the remaining regulatory landscape and the proposed transition to a structured policy framework. If you recall, in September, foundational concepts for subject area organization and classification were introduced, and in October, the committee approved the policy development policy and procedure and endorsed the plan to transition and rescind remaining regulations. So in the analysis section of this report, you'll see 8 areas that we are bringing to your attention tonight. 4 of them have already been before you, so I'll just summarize those quickly. So as mentioned, the establishment of clarity through policy and procedure, the adoption of the policy development policy and policy development procedure, the classification and organization of policies and procedures, so all policies and procedures were organized under 11 subject areas, the rescission of regulations and consolidation of governance instruments. This has eliminated parallel government instruments, reduced duplication, and ensures that all the governance directions now flow through a single, transparent policy procedure framework aligned with trustee oversight and administrative accountability. and building system capacity. As we've informed you previously, we've been working with the senior team on professional development so that we can support their roles as policy holders and champions. So that brings me to the 4 elements that I want to bring to your attention today, and kind of a closing on the loop of where this journey started about a year ago. And that is the implementation of the 5-year review cycle and policy register. With the foundational elements of the framework in place, this represents the point at which policy governance transitions from framework design to embedded operational practice. To ensure sustainability, all policies and procedures have now been placed on a 5-year review cycle. The policy register is an important tool that operationalizes this cycle by establishing clear expectations around timing, accountability, and cadence for policy and procedure reviews. The policy register functions as the system-wide accountability tool, identifying when each policy or procedure is scheduled for review, the responsible policyholder, and the anticipated approval pathway. This tool is embedded into administrative council processes to support proactive planning, monitoring, and follow-through. And we've provided you a snapshot of this register tool in Appendix B. And if you want to turn your attention to Appendix B, you can see that on the very left, and apologize for the smaller font, is the dates of the Governance and Policy Committee committee meetings. Those kind of act as our North Star, and this tool is now embedded in administrative council practice. And every administrative council, we spend some time reviewing what policies and procedures are up for renewal or for discussion based on the upcoming governance and policy dates. And again, this is on a 5-year cycle. So there's 5 years of these spreadsheets, which takes us from, so if you can see that the records and information management policy and the communications policy, which were approved last week at the board meeting, they now move to the end of that 5-year cycle, and then they repeat the process. In addition to this, to support transparency and predictability, the Governance and Policy Committee will be provided with a forward-looking roster of policies scheduled to come before the committee within a 6-month period. And Appendix A is your first roster in this regard. You'll see that it's a review period between January and May 2026. This roster reflects anticipated policy work within the current planning cycle. And the goal is to keep trustees aware of what policies are on the planning cycle for a period of time. So in September, you'll receive a roster, and you'll receive an updated roster in January. I would suggest that we're in a bit of a grace period in this current cycle as we continue to, the policy register is a new tool for us at the administrative council level. So the policies that you see on that roster should give you an indication of the policies that are up for discussion and renewal, but it's not a 100% commitment that those policies will come before you. There's a lot of work that has to happen behind the scenes to bring a policy before you. So, but we do hope that it demystifies the process a little bit and gives you some 6 months of planning in terms of understanding what policies are at least being contemplated at the admin council level. And finally, 2 other additions that I'll bring before wrapping up. In parallel with these government reforms, staff are working to update the board's policy section on the public website. Policies and procedures will be presented in a much more accessible and searchable format aligned with the new classification system. So we hope that supports transparency and ease of access for staff, families, and community members. And we expect we are working to complete this change prior to the end of this school year. And in terms of next steps, staff are also working on the development of a DDSB community engagement framework, and we hope this will complement the board's policy governance framework and support a clear, more consistent understanding of how and when the board engages in public engagement and community consultation and building two-way dialogue with students, family, staff, and community partners. So further details on this work will be brought forward separately as that work progresses. So in conclusion, the report is provided for information and confirms that following staged oversight and approval at this committee level, the structures, tools, and review cadence required to support effective and sustainable policy governance are now in place. With the implementation of the 5-year review cycle and policy register, DDSB has moved from a document-based approach to a predictable, transparent system for policy and procedure renewal and oversight. Madam Chair, that concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Trustees, are there any questions? Seeing no questions, but I will say thank you so much for the report, and it really is refreshing to finally see a list of policies and actually see the cycle and how that it is going to be transparent to the public and available to the public, which must, it's a records management system that we really needed, and so I much appreciate all the work that has gone into this at this point in time. Thank you. So we're moving on to the next item, which is recommended actions, revised public concern policy. Again, I'll pass it over to Senior Manager Galen Eagle.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. This report brings forward housekeeping updates to the public concerns policy for approval and an updated public concerns procedure for information. So the public concerns policy was last reviewed in 2024 and the associated procedure in 2023. A review is undertaken at this time to migrate both documents into the board's new policy and procedure templates and to confirm a continued alignment with Ministry of Education's direction related to the establishment of a student and family support office, which, if you recall from updates previously, school boards, non-supervised school boards in Ontario must have in place by the beginning of next school year. So in reviewing the requirements set out in policy program memorandum, and we are also reviewing this with respects to the requirements set out in policy program memorandum number 170. So this work supports timely, accessible, and consistent responses to public concerns. So the policy updates reflect minor refinements to the definitions and clarifications within the governance framework. The accompanying procedure has been updated and is provided for information. So as part of this housekeeping review, the policy and procedure are proposed to be renamed to remove the references to engagement in anticipation of the development of a separate engagement policy. So we're trying to avoid any confusion, and we believe that the new upcoming engagement policy will be much more relevant to that topic. Then we just didn't want to cause confusion there. So it is recommended that the Governance and Policy Committee recommend approval of the revised public concerns policy to the board and receive the revised public concerns procedure for information. That concludes my report, Madam Chair. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, trustees. The recommendation is found on page 19. Just if there's a trustee willing to move the recommendation that the Governance and Policy Committee recommends to the Board of Trustees that the revised public concerns policy be approved, and that the matter proceeds to the Board of Trustees for consideration at its next regular meeting. Trustee Oldfield? And it's open for questions and discussions. Trustee Brown.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I'm looking at the page 22 in Appendix A, the policy concerns, and it seems to be, I know you said it was some minor adjustments, but I'm looking at things like through more direct public engagement at board meetings and committee of the whole standing meetings. Could you explain why that would have been, you're asking for that to be retracted? Because if this is a public policy, public concern policy, then it seems to omit the public in two places, in A and B. And so on page 22, policy concerns and operational concerns.
Yeah, I'll need a little bit of clarification through you, Madam Chair. So those are definitions of policy concerns and operational concerns. Those changes were made with respect to clarifying the difference between governance level concerns when a member of the public has an issue and is engaging the school board as part of an inquiry, and the definition of operational concerns in terms of it being more of a day-to-day operational. In reviewing this with respect to the new student family support offices, we thought that there was a lack of clarity in those definitions. So the goal of refining those two definitions was to provide more clarity for the public when they're engaging in the inquiry process as to what constitutes a policy concern and what constitutes an operational concern, because they have different paths for resolution.
And just, and again, my understanding too is, correct me if I'm wrong, as far as that this is now a concerns policy and engagement will be a separate policy as well. Does that answer your question, Trustee Brown? Thank you. Any other further questions? I do have one comment though. It's more on, let me just pull my sticker out here. It's more on sort of the procedure, and I know that it's for staff, but one of the things is that there will be tracking of concerns coming through that are governance related. And although there is a mention that, basically system-based concerns will be provided, will be referred to the basically the established committees, either the governance or through the board, through participation in the board meetings. What I don't see clearly outlined here is sort of a monitoring of those concerns that may come in and how they're going to be brought forward, that maybe come into through staff or from parents, bring it into the parent support office, and how they are going to be tracked and then referred to the various committees. And it sounds like we're just going to tell the parents or whoever that they got to go to the trustee, or they've got to go here, they've got to go there. And I would say that that's sort of adding to the level of it. And would it be wise if we had tracked those, and that every so often a reporting, so like a monitoring, reporting to the trustees on a regular basis, maybe a semi-annual basis, the concerns, or as they come up. So I'm just wondering, there's nothing that's reckoned as far as under the record keeping or the communication about monitoring that.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. We are still in a bit of, we still don't have a lot of clarification as to exactly what our obligations are going to be under the student and family support offices. We've done preliminary work and we formed a working group to design how that system is going to be based for DDSB, and we've had some initial opportunities to consult some of the supervised boards who have their offices up and running. Certainly throughout that process, the records and information management operations will be keenly aware of the data collection, and we'll have to be putting that lens towards whatever data that is being collected through that office. But I'm wondering at this stage if it's a little preliminary to insert that into procedure without having an exact understanding of what that office is going to look like and what the expectations from the government in terms of reporting will be.
I appreciate that. I'm just also questioning though, if say there was many different areas going to different parents coming forward about certain policies that were similar across the supervisors, how it would come from there and how is it tracked to the trustees to make them aware, like, hey, we've had a consistent concern about X policy. How does that get tracked and there's actually nothing in the procedure that says, other than the way it sounds, is that the parent has to go directly to a trustee or make a presentation, and it's not coming from staff where they've seen something. So I'm just questioning the monitoring of that.
Through you, Madam Chair, it is a good question. I think we're trying to be clear and create a path for families. And one of the reasons why we brought this back forward was to examine the current processes as they will relate to a hypothetical process that we haven't been given a lot of information on right now. I can tell you that tracking of issues by subject and classification is basically one of the main asks of the student and family support offices. And so we are currently developing processes for how in the intake process, those inquiries get classified so that they get to the right person, but they are also reporting. I believe, I can't speak for the government's intentions, but I do know in terms of their some of why they've argued that they want these offices is that school boards have not been traditionally tracking complaints and inquiries by groupings and by subject matters, and we haven't really been able to answer the question that you've posed tonight, Madam Chair. So I do believe part of that process will answer your question. I would just suggest that this time it would be a little premature to try to guess exactly how that's going to play out in the procedure at this point. But we're more than happy to reopen the procedure as we work towards establishing that student and family support office to make sure that it's in alignment with those expectations.
Thank you. Trustee Brown.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So I'm coming back to operational concerns. So, but reading this again, it says these concerns are addressed through established operational processes. Is there a link to what that process, or would there be a link to what that operational process looks like? Because I see through direct communication with appropriate DDSB staff, it just seems really vague. And I know you don't have a lot of information, I'm trying to understand, but as I'm reading this policy, I'm like, okay, this is not really telling me anything, because it's who is the appropriate DDSB staff. Now, I know that we don't know until we know, which I understand that part, but it's almost like we're talking, we put here established operational process. So if it's established, it must be written down somewhere.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, it's written down in the operational, on the procedure side. So there's a clear steps that delineate the appropriate level of engagement when you have an inquiry. It starts at the classroom level, and that's the general idea that most issues have to be resolved closest to where the issue raised. So it's a classroom level, so that would be the classroom teacher. If that can't be resolved, then it would be a principal issue. And if that can't be resolved, then it's escalated to the board level, and that would go to the appropriate superintendent, and ultimately the associate director would have the final say in that flow. It's a different process altogether when it's a governance-related issue because the roles that the trustees plays with your constituents and yours, there's a different path towards an answer or some form of resolution. So that's why the delineation in the policy between governance and operation is so important.
Trustee Brown.
Sorry, thank you, through you, Chair. This is just a suggestion. I was thinking that if this policy does go through, that there is a link to that link of, so if somebody was going through this policy, that they would be able to click on it somewhere to say, oh, well, here's what we do, if that's possible.
Through you, Madam Chair, we can certainly consider that option, yes.
Trustee Linton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I think similar to the questions that have just been asked, I'm just trying to ensure that if this is a document that might be accessed by the general public, that the language is a little clearer. So maybe let me ask that as my first question. Is this document externally facing as well, or only internal?
Through you, Madam Chair, this is an external document and it already exists. This is the only changes we're bringing to this document. This is the policy that's on the books, that's publicly available. The only changes are the ones you see in red, to the policy concerns and operational concerns section, and a slight tweak under objectives just to clarify how this works with other processes for addressing concerns. But this is a policy that is only a year old, so we're only suggesting these minor tweaks because we believe there was some lack of clarity in the definitions as this relates to the upcoming student, family, and support offices.
So I
Go
guess
ahead, Trustee Lynn.
Thank you. And again, through you, Chair. So I guess I'm just looking for a bit of more clarity in terms of some of the language. So when I scroll down to operational concerns and as stated, interactions affecting an individual student, school, or staff member, these are addressed through established operational processes and through direct communication with DDSB staff. My concern is when I look at policy concerns, it doesn't necessarily point you to a person to support, which I would, within the role of trustees, that is something that we take on, such as, committee meetings here and in other places. So I guess I'm a little concerned that as an external facing document, it doesn't necessarily point you in the direction on how you may resolve a policy concern, other than saying, it's established through governance processes, including board and committee meetings in accordance with the board consolidation, but it doesn't send you to a person that may help navigate. So the language isn't clear as per if I'm general public, how I may resolve a policy issue or concern. So I'm wondering if there is some work that can be done, if we could intertwine who is that person at the end of this process that someone may be able to reach out to, or if we feel this encompasses and the general public are more than aware, so we don't need to tweak this.
Through you, Madam Chair, I would just point out that the public has access to the procedure as well, which is very specific in terms of the steps for each step of the way to address a public concern. It also explains the response rate, which is a 40 hours response time. So there's a lot more details that the public facing have if they were to review the procedure as well, which puts the policy into operation. So the policy is at a values level. It describes our commitment to responding to public concerns in a timely manner, and the procedure provides the operational direction and the clarity for the members of the public. And I will also suggest that, if you go to any of the supervised boards right now and go on their board website and click through their student family support offices, the communications that are wrapped around those offices clearly delineate all this in a very upfront way, and that would be the expectation for DDSB as we move forward with those offices in September as well.
Just for clarification, I did notice that there is it says a DDSB Public Concerns Protocol flowchart, which wasn't part of the papers that we had. I didn't see it anyways, the actual flowchart. So as one of the appendices, so I'm expecting that flowchart will also be able to basically clearly outline sort of the process as well.
Through you, Madam Chair, that was an oversight. That flow chart should have been included in this package, so that may have been able to answer some of those questions as well. Yeah. It is visible on the board website as an appendix to this policy currently, though. So thank you for bringing that to the attention, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Okay, we do have a motion on the floor to basically. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Chair Edwards. Trustee
Sorry.
Pinello does have a hand.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see it. They're very small. I'm very sorry. Trustee Pinello.
No worries. Thank you so much. Through you, Chair. Maybe less of a question, more of a suggestion in hearing the conversation, particularly around response times. And I note that this is still, the plane is starting to be flown while it's still being built and developed. So I understand that. Perhaps in that work group and when consulting with some of the already supervised boards, we are also seeing and hearing quite a bit of public feedback, both from communities that are impacted by supervised boards and from those trustees who have since been set aside. about response times not actually being as they are and the quality of responses differing quite a bit. And so I would ask to that maybe in your conversations when you are consulting with these other boards or folks and staff, that you're asking what some of those response pieces are actually looking like, and maybe what some of the barriers have been to issuing responses, or whether those are, you know, automated responses that don't necessarily address people's concerns or get to the root of the problem. So I would be very interested to hear that, because we are seeing, particularly in the news and then in various trustee spaces, that this keeps coming up. And so it would be, I think, in our best interest to start asking those questions sooner than later, and just to get an idea of how there is so much variance and why some response times are not falling within that 40 hours, and so on and so forth. So I would just put that forward for consideration and to be noted, and I appreciate the work done so far. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Pennell. I'm just going to do one more check to see if there's any more hands or questions. Seeing none, there is a motion on the table that the Governance and Policy Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that the revised public concerns policy be approved and that the matter proceed to the Board of Trustees for consideration at its next regular meeting. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to the next recommended action is the draft political activities policy and revised board member code of conduct. And we again will move it to Senior Manager Galen Eagle.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. One of the reasons through the agenda setting for this meeting, we moved the information item before the required actions was because I wanted to present the 5-year cycle and give that background before we tackled the political activities policy. So part of all of that first speech was a review of our policies and looking at perhaps some gaps in our policies as well. And one area of that review, as part of this structured review process, staff assessed existing governance instruments across subject areas and identified the absence of a formal policy addressing political and election-related activities within DDSB schools, workplaces, and government settings. So, governance settings. So, while the board does have long-standing, expectations and practices around nonpartisanship and appropriate use of public resources, these expectations were not previously consolidated within a single clear governance instrument. The absence of explicit direction creates the potential for inconsistent interpretation during periods of heightened political activity, particularly during municipal, provincial, and federal election cycles. So with the municipal election scheduled for October 2026, establishing clear governance level direction in advance, we hope supports consistency, fairness, and the protection of student learning environments. We also hope it reinforces the appropriate separation between political campaigning and the use of board property, resources, and platforms. So the proposed political activities policy and corresponding amendments to the board member code of conduct are intended to close the governance gap, strengthen clarity across roles, and preserve public trust in the nonpartisan integrity of public education. So there's really two asks before trustees tonight in the recommended action. One is with respect to the political activities policy, which is in your package, and the other is recommended amendments to the trustee code of conduct. So I'll start foremost with the political activities policy. This policy provides governance level direction on political activities and the use of board resources as they intersect with municipal, provincial, and federal politics within DDSB environments. It is intended to protect safe, inclusive, and nonpartisan learning and working environments while respecting democratic participation and freedom of expression. For clarity, the policy is not intended to regulate curriculum content, Indigenous learning, identity-based learning, or student engagement with social issues where those activities are curriculum aligned and nonpartisan. The distinction is further supported through clear definitions that differentiate political activities from nonpartisan educational activities. In short, political activities as they are defined in the policy are always prohibited. Nonpartisan educational activities are prohibited under certain circumstances that are delineated in the policy and the accompanying procedure. So this policy sets clear expectations to protect public trust in public education by reinforcing appropriate use of board authority, resources, platforms, and instructional time, and by supporting consistent, defensible decision-making across schools and workplaces. And so with respect to the board member code of conduct, the amendments we are suggesting address political activity as it relates specifically to trustees, particularly during election periods. Locating these expectations within the board member code of conduct ensures that trustee responsibilities and limitations are addressed within the appropriate governance instrument. In short, the amendments clarify the separation between trustee duties and campaign activity, expectations regarding the use of board resources, property, and platforms during election periods, conduct expectations when engaging in political activity in personal capacity, and alignment with the board's nonpartisan governance obligations. These amendments are not intended to restrict lawful political participation in a personal capacity. Rather, they reinforce the distinction between trustees' responsibilities and campaign activity, supporting clarity, fairness, and public confidence in board governance. So tracked revisions of the board member code of conduct, we haven't included the entire board conduct, but we've put together the relevant pages with the track changes, so you can see those in Appendix B. Anything you see in red in Appendix B is a recommended amendment to the code. And one final piece of this report package, the accompanying political activities procedure operationalizes the political activities policy by establishing clear, consistent, and practicable expectations for political and election-related activities on DDSB property, platforms, and at DDSB events, and it is there included for your information. Finally, before I conclude, I just want to run through the risks and opportunities section. So in the absence of clear governance direction regarding political and election-related activity, the board faces increased risks of inconsistent responses to political requests across schools and departments, perceived endorsement or misuse of board property, resources, or platforms, exposure of students and staff to partisan advocacy within instructional environments, ambiguity regarding trustee conduct during election periods, and reputational harm that may undermine public confidence in the nonpartisan integrity of public education. Periods of heightened political activity, including municipal, provincial, and federal election cycles, increase the likelihood of these risks if expectations are not clearly articulated in advance. And in terms of the opportunities, we are presented with providing this political activities policy, procedure, and amendments to the trustee code of conduct. Approval would provide, establish clear, consistent, and defensible governance expectations, protect curriculum-aligned civic learning while maintaining nonpartisan learning environments, provide clarity and role protection for trustees during election periods, reinforce appropriate stewardship of public resources, and strengthen public trust in the board's governance and decision-making. So it is recommended, the recommended action is that the Governance and Policy Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that 1, the draft political activities policy included as Appendix A be approved, and 2, the proposed amendments to the board member code of conduct related to political and election-related activities included as Appendix B be approved. Through you, Madam Chair, that concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. And maybe for discussion purposes, I would like to look at, to make it a little easier, to look at just the policy to begin with, and then the code of conduct, if that makes sense to trustees around the table. And if that's the case, then we're somewhat, looking at 2 motions in order to have this discussion, but it just makes a little bit more sense to navigate the discussions around the table. So with your indulgence, I would like to see that if a trustee would like to recommend that the political activities policy included in Appendix A be approved, and I'll have that as the first motion, please. Trustee Brown. Okay, so now we'll open up the policy for basically discussion. Trustees, I have Trustee Cowie.
Hello, and through you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions regarding this. Due to the position I fulfill, I am appointed, so I'm curious about how some of this relates to me, especially at time. I'm also a university professor who focuses on elections and voting, provincially and federally. So where does this, where might I end up crossing a line here? Because I do, especially during election periods, I do media interviews. I'm doing it obviously as my capacity as an academic in this area of focus, but people have highlighted and people will and potentially see my connection to doing work as a trustee and potentially being called partisan when I might not be called partisan. For instance, I've recently spoken up about Bill C5 and Bill 5 from the federal and provincial governments in regards to fast tracking resource development, because that impacts an area that I focus on. So that's well documented. It's well in the media, but that could mean I'm being partisan in a sense because I'm calling out both governments, even though they're different parties. So I'm curious about how this impacts that, and especially when we look at the definition of on page 36, we're talking about political activities, because I understand this and I'm agreeing with a lot of this and having to be able to keep it nonpartisan. I'm just trying to figure out where the line is, especially with work for some of us who've done. If you Google my name as well, it comes up with past partisan activities from when I was younger. It's very easy to look up, so I can again be accused of bias or being partisan, even though I'm no longer a partisan in any way. And with political activities, some of the things that are mentioned, I'm just curious with, again, how that would play out, especially for a role of someone in any of our capacities who's doing this type of work, and how they'll be reflected that or be potentially targeted with this, because my main job is, as an academic in political science, talking about things like this every time they come up. And being approached. I'm on the media list for the University of Toronto for this. So how does this work, and how does this impact anyone in the future who's doing this, but also some of what I do as being able to be a trustee in DDSB, even though I'm appointed through and on behalf of recommendation from Mississauga's Kugok Island. The other question I have is regards to definition. Sorry, I apologize. In regards to candidates, can you explain to me what you are what is referenced in the policy by Indigenous governance elections?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll answer the first part of your concern, Trustee Cowie, and then I can seek clarification on the second question. With respect to the first concern you raised as a role of your trustee, again, we've pulled the trustee code of conduct questions as they relate to political activities and elections, and have brought those into the Code of Conduct amendment. So the political activities definition in the policy would refer to our staff and our families and our interaction, but as you, as a trustee, with respect to political activities, we've allowed, the reason why we've addressed those to the trustee code of conduct is that's where the other conduct of a trustee sits, and so those amendments are what would regulate any new responsibilities with respect to election activities, not the definition in the policy. With respect to candidates, I might ask my colleague Shreya here to speak to the Indigenous government elections. Do you have a specific answer for that one?
While Shreya is looking for that, Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I can pipe in, Galen as well, while Shreya is looking for that, if you don't mind. And I can provide some comments, I think, Trustee Cowie's concern. And looking at the proposed amendments to the consolidated bylaw, I think your point is well taken. And one solution might be to delete the proposed 6.44, which talks sort of generally about political activity. And I think that would cover it. And then 6.45 forward is all geared towards campaigning. So I think that's okay. Maybe just some tightening on 6.45. No, sorry, 6.46. the last line, it says for political or campaign purposes. So we might even be able to delete the word political from 6.46, and then I think it's clearly directed to campaign activities, because that is clearly what the intention is, and so I think I haven't talked to Galen or Shreya about that, but and I'm not sure if they want to provide comment, but I think that would address your concern, and I think it still satisfies the intent of the bylaw, which is that board resources not be used for campaign purposes. So I think if the board is going to move this forward, Chair Edwards, one thing the board might consider is doing so with 6.44 removed, and with an amendment to 6.46 to remove for political on the third line.
Thank you.
Or rather, political, I think we still need the for, so it'd be for campaign purposes. We're removing the words political or.
Thank you, and we'll make a note of that when we get to the code of conduct, for sure. We'll come back to that as far as we're looking at the policy to cover that. And do we have, go ahead, Galen.
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you for the indulgence. So that element, Trustee Cowie, came in our review of other school boards who had similar political activities. And it relates to Indigenous electors as they are defined under Elections Ontario, but we'd be happy to review or amend that language if you deemed appropriate. Happy to have that conversation.
I think that considering, as Trustee Cowie said, is that Indigenous trustees are appointed, and so that language would have to be reflected, I think, in the policy at this point in time as well.
Through you, Madam Chair, one just clarification. So we're also talking about political activity as it relates to municipal, provincial, and federal. So it would be any kind of campaigning or endorsement activity through kind of any political spectrum within those three areas. So not necessarily in that regard tied to a trustee election.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Trustee Cowie, sorry. Yeah, okay. Trustee Cowie, did you have a second supplement to yours? And then I'll go to Trustee Pinello next.
Yes, just a quick thank you through you, Madam Chair. I would be happy to talk about the Indigenous governance side, because when we're talking about that, there's chief of council, there's elections, there's also elections through political organizations, and they're not necessarily partisan, but some of them are government, and then things like the Assembly of First Nation, the Chiefs of Ontario, they're not actually governing bodies, they're not actually a government. So I'm happy to talk with you about that to clarify that if possible going forward.
Yeah, I'd be very happy to have that conversation, Trustee Cannon. And it could be a change to, it could be an addition in terms of an additional definition that we can consider. So we're happy to have that as an amendment that we could apply following a resolution as well. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Trustee Pinello.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. I echo some of what Trustee Cowie has said, because many of us in our capacity as trustees obviously come from backgrounds of advocacy, otherwise we would not be here. And seeing as how the personal is inherently political, and many of us do work that does intersect with various campaigns, not necessarily partisan campaigns, but initiatives, campaigns, advocacy, feedback for policy in different ministries and areas as they stretch both federal, provincially, and even sometimes more at the local municipal levels. I would ask that we do add clarity around exactly what the confined spaces are with which, when we are acting in perhaps our 9-to-5 capacities, or even in our community member capacities, how and when those lines can be called into question. And I say this because, right now, we know that there's campaigns happening around changes to OSAP. And so those things are titled campaigns. And so I know it might sound silly because we understand logically the definition here is particularly around organized political parties that are partisan in nature, but it would be maybe beneficial for this policy to clarify what it means by campaigns and how that relates to advocacy that we all may or may not do with our respective platforms outside and in conjunction with education and beyond. This, I think, would be helpful because knowing that there are methods by which the public can raise concerns with the Integrity Commissioner, it might help address on the front end repeated concerns when any particular trustee is being vocal on any particular issue. And I say that also knowing that a great number of our Black and Black biracial trustees are part of the Black Trustees Caucus for both OPSPA, but also we're part of the Black parliamentarians for organizing and work. So there are many spaces and places where we are going to overlap, not always in a partisan capacity, but you know, those lines would be well defined, I think, and clarified for those of us who do a great amount of advocacy work outside of just this space. So I would just ask for that consideration, please.
Response?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, I'm happy to respond. And perhaps I'll call upon Mr. Cotter to help answer and clarify, though. In terms of the political activities policy, that is not in any way attempting to regulate trustee activity. All of the trustee activity as respect to the report that I'm bringing is identified in the changes of the Code of Conduct. So with response to Trustee Cowie's concerns, Mr. Cotter's presented some amendments. However, the language in the policy itself does not apply at the trustee level.
Yeah, and I think through you, Chair Edwards, if I might, one thing that we might consider, given the comments and given obviously changes to the Code of Conduct have significant ramifications for trustees. Obviously, any further comments trustees might have tonight, maybe we go away with it and we work on revising and clarifying the language in the Code of Conduct. And as Galen has stated, that doesn't impact the policy which can be approved by the Governance Committee today, and that can at least confirm the board's position on regulating staff conduct and provide direction to the director in terms of procedures going forward for staff conduct. And we can come back with some revised language for the Code of Conduct to incorporate your comments and concerns tonight. So that's something the committee might wish to consider as well.
Thank you, Councillor Cotter. I'm just going to proceed with any more questions on the policy, and then I'll ask the question whether basically around, because we are dealing with the Code of Conduct separately. So then if trustees aren't comfortable, this is just a thought, if trustees are still not comfortable with the policy proceeding the way it is, a trustee can call for a deferment of to the next governance at that point in time. So just so you know, that's sort of the direction that I'm going forward, proceeding forward as far as that's concerned. So we'll just I think that there's still some trustees that have some comments on the policy, and we'll proceed with those questions or comments, and then I'll go towards the motion or whether somebody wants to defer it. Okay?
Sorry, I just had a supplemental. My hand was up.
Okay, go ahead, Trustee Pennell.
I realized the colors are overlapping. I apologize. Just really quickly, because I think I heard two conflicting things there, and I just want clarification. I believe Galen had said that Code of Conduct was not, and I'm just going back into my captions, Code of Conduct not having ramifications for trustees, and now Councillor Cotter has that they have significant ramifications for trustees. So can I just confirm, because I am referring to the language of the policy and thus the resulting changes to the code of conduct. Obviously, trustees are held to the code of conduct. And so I just want to confirm that we are saying that the language here does matter because it will have an impact on trustees.
So the policy does not speak to trustee conduct. The policy only addresses staff use of DDSB resources. So trustee conduct is only going to be governed by the code of conduct. Now, so that I think we may be able to expressly state that as well, because of course we do have some general parameters in the code of conduct that say trustees are subject to the board's policies and procedures. So I think we may want to make it expressly clear that on this topic it's only the code of conduct that speaks to trustee conduct. So it would only be the code.
Thank you. I'm just, Trustee Oldfield.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, I'd like to move this to the next governance meeting. Move to defer it. Did I say defer? Sorry. I
Yes.
don't remember if I actually said.
Okay, we have a motion to defer to the next governance meeting. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. And just so that any further comments, though, that people will have, we could direct additional comments to basically Galen Eagle, and so that they can look at that when they are reviewing the policy at that point in time. So based on also around, because of the issues around the policy, and we've also had some questions on code, I'd still probably like to look at the code of conduct and any additional concerns about the code of conduct that trustees might want to bring forward, because it looks like that one will also be deferred as well, because of it has an impact on the on the code of conduct, on the policy. So first, up for speaking on the code of conduct, we already have comments from Trustee Cowie that we basically have made notes about the changes and possible changes that Councillor Cotter has already identified. But we'll go to Trustee Tracy Brown.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Because these policies, in my mind, and the code of conduct are so tightly aligned, I would also recommend that this be deferred. So we can, when we are looking at it, we're looking at them in tandem. Does that make sense to me?
Yes, and that's what I was suggesting too, but I think that we're here, we should at least be able to provide some of the input that maybe we've already have, so that be considered when we go through the deferment, right? As well. I think it's wise to use, people have spent their time looking at the code of conduct and looking at the policies, and if they could provide the code, that would be very helpful to staff at this point in time. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm looking for. Any further comments around the code of conduct that trustees would like to add? I actually do have some, if somebody else has. Oh, Trustee Brown, thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So I know this is already existing with the social media side. Is this still relevant based on where we are now with social media? So, because I know that this was a discussion last year, year before. We've had many discussions, but again, social media has taken another step forward. It's because I'm looking at things like any social media account operated by a trustee is subject to the code of conduct. Now, if we are looking at this from a political side and just say you were running for, I don't know, the premier or something, that's now saying that, well, no, you can't have any social media as long as you're a trustee. So that means you can't run for anything, like no position based on that statement. So I'm looking at, it's going to be 6.49. And it's the first one under social media. And even though I've gone through them all, I'm wondering if that needs to be maybe updated. I'm unsure of the word that I should be using now because I don't tweet, so I don't even know if that should even be a thing anymore. But I think it should be looked at, right, to bring it up to date when it comes to social media.
Okay.
Yeah, through you, Chair Edwards, I'm happy to jump in, and Mr. Eagle and I can certainly take that away, and when we come back at the next meeting, look at how we can better tie in the social media piece with the political piece, the new changes. So I think that's a fair comment. Obviously, there's no prohibition against using social media. It's just you know, you have to abide by the code. You can't say something on social media that would violate the board's standard of conduct. But I hear you in terms of making sure that it's clear what would be appropriate use of social media in terms of the tie-in with the political activity language that we've now proposing to add. So that's a fair comment. We'll take that away.
Other questions? I do have a comment around myself around political activities not permitted on property, and we do talk about other people outside the board being able to go through the community use of schools. I just want to give you a scenario that has happened in the past around a provincial election, where actually our SEAC held a debate for candidates in their area, their particular municipality, invited candidates to talk about specifically just education issues. And it was held at a school, and we actually had student trustees were actually the moderators of the debate as well. And it was a really good educational piece because it got community involved and so forth. But it was basically, it was a debate between all the candidates, and it was really, really well received. I'm just wondering, under that sort of scenario, yes, there was a community use sort of permit that was put through. But I just want you to consider that when we're looking at the policy, is that there are particular events that might happen, both from a provincial, federal, and also a municipal sort of way, where the ability to get candidates together to talk about education matters for the community.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm happy to respond. So the political activities policy really looks at instructional time. So during school hours, after hours would be through the community use of schools policy. And I would have to defer to my colleague Lisa, but I don't believe there is any prohibition of political activity with respect to that policy.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Certainly, the community use of schools policy does contemplate what type of activities we can have in our schools, and it ties closely to the values and the stated mission of the Durham District School Board. So we do have anybody who takes out a permit attest to the fact that none of the activities that would be ongoing during the time they have basically rented our school would be in contravention with the stated sort of beliefs and goals of the board. So with that, I mean, there's always the chance that a group, not your group or not the SEAC group, but a group could rent this place, fill out the application, and then have something that doesn't comply. But we do monitor the use of our schools, and we would certainly take steps to prevent it from happening in the future.
Thank you. I do have another comment about in the procedure, and I know it's in infancy as far as developing that, but it does mention that the Public Affairs Department provides guidance on political, and I'm not sure who the Public Affairs Department is in our, other than, you know, because we're used to calling it communication, is that going to be a rename and so forth, just to make that clear when that goes through, because as I said, it's not really clear as far as who the Public Affairs Department is when we look at structure at this point in time. Yeah, I think that's it I have at this point in time. So is there any other questions? Now, we did defer the other policy, and I think it's probably pretty good to have a motion to defer the code of conduct as well. And so I know trustee, I said that we were going to do that. We'll just make sure that trustee Brown had originally said to defer, so that's the motion to defer the code of conduct as well. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, and that is the revised bylaws for the organizational meeting. Again, Councillor Cotter.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Edwards. The report can be found starting at page 55 of your agenda package. And we've brought forward for your consideration some proposed amendments to the board's bylaws to streamline the organizational meeting. And the the highlight of the proposed changes are in the bullets that can be found on page 57 of the agenda package. There's four sort of main changes. The main streamlining change is actually the last bullet point, where we're proposing that the election of chairs and vice chairs of all the committees of the board would not take place at the organizational meeting, but would take place at the first committee meeting following the organizational meeting. So we believe that is something that trustees have expressed interest in the past. So in addition to streamlining the meeting, would provide greater autonomy for the committee in doing its work and electing its own chair and vice chair. There are three other bullets there where while we're here to make amendments or propose amendments to the committee, we thought we'd propose amendments to more closely align the election of statutory committee members in a manner consistent with the language in the regulation, and specific with respect to the length of the term. We've been electing members annually, and the regulations really require that they should be elected for the term. Of course, it doesn't stop somebody from stepping down annually, which is sort of the way we've approached it in the past. I don't think we were non-compliant in the past. We're just effectively stepping down and running again, but we're proposing to align it more closely with the language in the regulation. The election would be for the term specified in the regulation. And you can see those changes in the chart on page, starts on page 58. We've shown you the place where there's no change in the election, but you'll see in the right-hand column where there's changes that are being suggested. And most of those, as you'll see, relate to the duration of the term, aside from the main streamlining change to move the election of the chair and vice chairs of the board committees to the committee level. The actual changes in the language of the bylaw are attached as Appendix C, which commences on page 73 in track changes. Pretty straightforward in terms of if the board, the committee rather is aligned with the proposed changes, then the language just sort of picks up on those and mirrors the recommendations. So subject to any questions you may have, that is our report, and it's kind of a half an information item, half a recommended action. This is obviously strictly the board's process. It's totally up to you. So it's not something we're like recommending that the board do. We're recommending you consider this, and it's obviously your discretion in terms of how you want to proceed.
Thank you. As I said, it's up to us to how we want to proceed, so I would, at this point in time, I would like to see questions. Anybody had any questions about the bylaw changes before we actually put a motion on the table at this point in time? So, Trustee Brown. Sorry, Trustee Morton is first, and then Trustee Brown.
Thank you, and through you. I can understand.
Point of order, Chair. Point of order.
Yes,
Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt Trustee Morton, but I just wanted to have some clarification around our procedure here. Usually what happens is that the motion is put forward, and then of course it's open for discussion on the floor. I'm not quite sure why we're doing it a little differently. I think this is the procedure that we've always followed.
Yes, I agree, but yes, I agree. But at this point in time, it isn't really it's a sort of a double thing here. So if somebody wants to put a motion and say we go ahead and move it first instead of doing the other, then that's what I do. But at this point in time, it's up to the board whether they really want to proceed with the bylaws changes. So that's where. So if somebody wants to put that forward first, that's not a problem.
I'd be happy to move that motion.
Okay, so the motion basically is that to approve the bylaw revisions included in Appendix C and the matter proceed to the Board of Trustees at its next regular meeting. So that motion has been put forward, and so trustees could basically speak around the motion and any changes to the Code of Conduct. Thank you. Trustee Morton, so as you're putting the motion forward, if you want to speak first, and then I'll have Trustee Morton.
Yes, just in considering the changes here, I feel there's certainly merit in making the changes to the electing the chair and vice chair at the first meeting of the committee. So I would be in favor of that for sure. As far as the SEAC and SAL proposal for 4 years and pick for 2 years, hope I've covered it all. I don't have any issues with that either. I would support that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Trustee Morton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I can understand why we want to streamline the organizational meeting, but there's one point here that I could not support, and that is the supervised alternative learning. So I've served on that committee for 16 years, and I really enjoy meeting the students, their parents, but not all trustees would like that. So if at that first organizational meeting, you elect somebody for the 4-year term, that may not work. So I would like to see, if you want to go to every 2 years, I could support that, but not for a 4-year term. I also agree that you don't have to have alternatives for SAL, but you should have 2 trustees on that committee. And Michelle is not able to be here tonight, but I would like her opinion on this as well. But I cannot support that 4-year term.
Thank you. Do you want to make an amendment, Trustee Morton?
Well, I cannot support the motion going forward the way it is now. I'm curious to know if Superintendent Stephen Nevels has been approached about this, or Monique Mueller. I'd like to hear other opinions, not just my own.
I'll have Director Camille Williams-Taylor speak, please.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. This amendment or this adjustment is being proposed, as with the Special Education Advisory Committee, because it's more closely reflective of what is captured in the regulation in the Education Act. So while it is that Durham District School Board has been practicing a certain approach, it is not necessarily reflective of how it's worded in the Education Act. That said, I think Councillor Cotter made it pretty clear that even if trustees were to assume a 4-year term in the case of Sal, or a 4-year term in the case of this SEAC, and a trustee was not interested in continuing, it doesn't preclude a trustee from stepping aside. So I think, Trustee Morton, this was not generated by an interest or an approach by the staff, which would then engage that kind of discussion with other people who are engaged with both SEAC and SAL, but rather it's a reflection of a consultation of the Education Act.
Thank you.
I have Trustee Brown that's been waiting, and then I have basically Trustee Linton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I'm just looking at where we said on the communications plan, where for the past 2 years, PD sessions has been scheduled 2 weeks prior. Well, unfortunately, when we first became trustees, we didn't have that PD session. So I also think that when we are looking at how do you decide what position or where you would like to land as a trustee, what does that actually look like? Because I can only speak from personal. Personal was, I knew I wanted to be on the governance. I know that was what I came to be a part of, but I'm just thinking, is there a way of, while we're doing this, like, is there like a day of PD before the first organizational meeting for new trustees? And is there such a thing? Because I found that PD session very, very informative, and it helped to inform the decisions that I made going forward. And I don't know how that can be incorporated in this report. It's just a suggestion.
Thank you, Trustee Brown. And I know that there are other, just for information, that I know that there are other boards that do provide information sessions for candidates ahead of time, so they have a good idea of what candidates can expect as far as that's concerned. But I also know that officially you do not become in the role of the trustee until the date you are basically sworn in. Therefore, it's difficult to make candidates come to an organization. There's a bit of a conundrum there at that point in time. So that's something that we'll have to consider, somehow look at how other boards do it, I think. And now I have Trustee Linton. You're mute, Trustee Linton.
Had to be the first one for the day. So thank you, and for you, Chair. I think similar to Trustee Morton's point, 4 years is a long time, and there could be many changing circumstances in someone's life that may not allow them to commit in year 2 or 3. So I am concerned about the 4-year term, but maybe going to Council Carter, if you're able to potentially walk us through what would stepping down and then replacing said trustee at the committee look like? What would that process involve?
Yeah, I think, so thank you for the question, and through you, Madam Chair. So I think in particular with SEAC, Sal, I think, is a little more flexible. But I think with SEAC and PIC, the term is specified in the regulation. So my recommendation is you do those. Sal, I think you could leave as currently is if you wanted, but I think SEAC and PIC, you would go to the term specified, being 4 years for SEAC and 2 years for PIC. And then the trustee could simply indicate that they no longer wish to serve on that committee, and then we could have another election at the next organizational meeting. But I think by doing it that way, there's no issue with our compliance with those 2 regulations. So I think as long as somebody submitted their notice prior to the next organizational meeting, then we could just hold a replacement election at the next organizational meeting.
Additional comments? my only comment to that, I understand that the legislation says 4 years. However, to me, it also in some ways, by having the trustee having to be able to say, I must step down, in some ways it's a little bit on a punitive nature, because it could be somebody that has to step down. And so I feel that that is a bit of an issue. I can see maybe moving to 2 years, and I know the legislation says 4, but I think that, you know, understanding the legislation says 4, but it's really difficult to have brand new trustees commit, especially to SEAC, for basically 1 month, 10 meetings, once a month, for 4 basically years. I think that's extremely difficult, and it also doesn't lend to basically transfer of knowledge as well, and being able to understand. So I think, you know, understand the legislation says 4. We can change it to 2, I think. It's still even saying, understand we're not in compliance with NACE's legislation, but I honestly, most boards do renew their committee, their CX every year, as far as that's concerned as well. So.
Yeah, and I think, just if I might, Chair Edwards, I think we can still reasonably take the position that we're compliant even with the shorter terms, on the basis that it's, you know, it's effectively a de facto step down for those trustees and a re-election each year, so that we're compliant.
So on that note, yes, I'm going to go back to Trustee Morton at this point in time.
Oh, sorry, I also have my hand up.
Another trustee had her hand up first.
Okay, sorry, Trustee Penello.
Thank you, Chair. If it's easier, the little numbers beside our hands might be more visible than the hands themselves. Thank you, and through you, I would agree with much of what was said, particularly around the privilege that it is to be able to come in as a new trustee and dedicate yourselves to any particular committee for 4 years is a huge ask. And as was already mentioned, this board in particular, we faced a lot of adjustments and challenges in our first year because so many of us were working full time, and we had to figure out what did it mean to be part of SAL and of SEAC, and the legislative requirements, the time commitments, what time of day those meetings were happening at. And so we're very fortunate that we have a blend of trustees with different availabilities who were able to make that work. But I do hesitate, and I echo what you said, Chair, about the punitive nature of having to vocalize a step down, because in many ways that might be interpreted as a failure or a disinterest to be able to serve, when in reality it's changes in circumstances happen every day. Capacity changes all the time. And so I do like the suggestion that, you know, perhaps keeping it 2 years is really important, because there's nothing precluding a trustee from running again if they truly love what they do and are able to commit to 2 2-year terms. But that period of reconsideration being built into it also enables that accessibility and that equity for representation that might be different than what currently is. So if someone's availability does switch partway through their term, or they have a better understanding in year 2 and 3, then perhaps it gives an opportunity for those regulated committees to have different representation that also reflects the needs of the communities. So I just wanted to, I guess, echo those pieces, and I would not support the change to 4 years, but I would support a consideration of to remain at 2 years and have that period of reconsideration that is as Council Cotter said, de facto step down, re-election, that of course all trustees are able to put their hats in the ring if they're interested. So thank you.
Thank you, and I'll go to Trustee Morton.
Thank you, and through you, I would like to propose an amendment so that the SAL committee would be elected every year. And my thinking is somebody might sign up the first year and want to do that, not realizing the level of commitment and the actual role on the SAL committee. So I would like to see SAL committee, no alternatives required, but 2 candidates elected annually.
Okay, I'm just trying to think as this, because it's not quite status quo, because status quo is 1 and an alternate. Is that correct? I'm trying to go through and find it quickly. What is it?
The way we have it now, we have 2 trustees who serve on the SAL committee, and I would like to see that continue.
Okay, so basically.
So I think the language is in 4.3.5, and it's the proposed language. The term of appointment of the 2 supervised alternative committee members and 2 alternative members shall be a 4-year term. So I think if we're still talking about 2 and 2, if I understood Trustee Morton correctly.
No, I would rather see it annually.
No, but I'm talking about the numbers. Two.
Certainly, yes, 2
Yeah,
and 2.
so 2 and 2, so all we need to do is amend 4.3.5 to say I think what we've done in the past is we've been silent on the length of the term and just done it annually. So that's what I would suggest, that from 4.3.4 to 4.3.6, we remove the length of the term and just do it annually.
I would be very happy with that, because I agree. If you come forward and say, I'm sorry, I'm not up to this, I want to step down, a lot of people would shy away from doing that, including me.
So I think, Chair Edwards, if there's no objection to that, then maybe what the board consider is moving the recommended action subject to removing the term lengths from 4.3.4, 4.3.5, and 4.3.6 of the proposed.
You're speaking very fastly, and I can't write that down.
Sorry,
Councillor Cotter.
Sorry, I'll slow down. I'm suggesting that maybe the recommendation be that the board, or the committee rather, adopt the recommended action subject to the length of the term specified in 4.3.4, 4.3.5, and 4.3.6 being deleted.
Yeah. All right. So again, so what I'm going to just suggest as far as the amendment is concerned for, just to be, because you're talking about the whole motion, because I don't know if there's other amendments that might still be coming forward, because we're also looking at maybe the language for SEAC as well. So so we have a motion basically to remove the term deleted on page 77 for 4.3.4 to 4.3.6, deleted in those in those sections.
Yeah, and that would cover SEAC, SAL, and PIC.
It will cover CX, SAL, and PIC?
Correct.
Okay. All right, so there we go. That the Governance and Policy Committee adopt the recommended actions as subject to the length of the term specified in section 4.3.4, 4.3.5, and 4.3.6 of the bylaws being deleted. And that works, covers both SEAC, SAL, and PIC.
Correct.
All right. So that's the motion on the table. Any further discussions on that motion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. So we have come to the conclusion of basically our business of our governance meeting. So can I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you. Trustee Linton, Trustee Penello. Good night, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.